Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as
Make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
I second that.
to move to second to approve the amended agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion is adopted. Public comment, nobody has signed up for public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment? I see nobody, so we'll move on to administration. And the first topic we have is our school superintendent and having to do with school safety.
Yeah, so I just want to take this opportunity to just kind of fill you in over some meetings I've had over the last couple weeks. So I did have a meeting with Jennifer Stapleton, the city administrator, and Chief Kuhn of Sandpoint City Police about the second school resource officer that they had budgeted and that we had planned for. And so we're currently moving forward with that plan. We have not received the contract yet, though. So the meeting that I had with the city was about a week and a half ago, and so we're still waiting for the contract with the second SRO. Knowing that the plan for the second SRO would have an office at Sandpoint Middle School, and Sandpoint is also in negotiations with the city of Kootenai to provide law enforcement in Kootenai, which would also give the second SRO jurisdiction in that area also. So that's the part on the cities. I will contact them and see if there's been a holdup, because at that point they were ready to send out the contract for us to have the second SRO. Last week I met with Sheriff Wheeler and Captain Tim Hemphill and Under Sheriff Roar Lakewold, and to check with the county with what's going on with outlying schools. At this point in time, they're not in a position to provide what we would call a school resource officer for the outlying areas. They will continue regular routine drive-bys to schools, but I could not get them to agree to a certain number of hours per month or anything, so we had a lot of discussion around that. The discussion really came to in the outlying areas of securing those schools. So I've had Matt deal, which we do not have any figures yet, but starting with the farthest outlying schools and securing the front entryway just to get a hard cost on what that would be, and starting with, say, Southside and starting with Clark Fork High School, just to see what are the options. Captain Hemphill was talking about an app that could maybe be used, but he was going to do more research and get a hold of me on that, versus the card system where we would go to an actual card system to get in, so that the front doors would be locked at all times. So anyway, that's kind of where that discussion went, so I have a better understanding of where the Sheriff's Department is and what they can provide, and also where we are with the Sandpoint City Police. So that's just kind of a report of where we are with both agencies within our school area.
I had a question, Tom.
Yeah.
Is the salary split with the city for the second resource officer, is that 50-50 type thing?
I believe it's 60-40. Is that correct, Lisa? Yeah. So 60% city,
The city, yeah.
40% school, and then they're actually on patrol over Christmas break, over the summer. You know, they take
So
care
they
of
have,
that.
they have additional responsibilities with the city when the school's not in
Correct.
session.
Correct.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So they'll be in place by the time school starts?
Well, I hope. That's the plan, and that was where I left the meeting. I haven't heard any different, just haven't seen the contract yet, so we'll check up on that. Yeah, Gary?
So how are we going to deploy the second SRO? Is it going to be Sandpoint Middle School is going to be his primary?
Correct. Yeah, Casey has an office there. That's where they'd be stationed, and I would leave it to Sandpoint City Police of where they would go. So really, they would be covering Farman, Stidwell, the alternative school, Washington Elementary, Sandpoint High School, Sandpoint Middle School, and Kootenai Elementary too, if that agreement comes with them providing services. So.
Okay, another comment with regard to the card lock system. There's been an epidemic of hacking of school computer systems, and there was a situation at a school in southern Idaho, Jerome, I believe, where hackers hacked the school computer system. They locked all the records, they shut down all the communications. Those schools in that district happen to have a card lock system. And the first indication they had that there was a problem was when, the custodian come to work early in the morning and he couldn't get in the building.
Yeah.
So, I
Just
mean, there
one of the
is a
factors.
benefit to the old-fashioned key
Yeah.
system.
Right, yeah. Yeah, one other thing dealing with the outlying schools, it's not as simple as locking the doors, it's also having the manpower to be able to open the doors, is it a push button? And I know the people that are working in the front office usually wear 10 different hats as it is, so that's another discussion. So it's not a simple solution, but I just wanted to give you an update of where we were with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I'll move on to
Sure.
student attendance and
Yeah,
finances.
and,
I'll brief on that.
This is real short. Some things I learned in Boise at State Department of Education is that the major part of our funding comes in the first 10 weeks of the school year. And currently, until there is a change in the funding formula, it's based on average daily attendance. So as we're setting goals within each of the building principals, and we'll meet with the principals next week, one of their goals will be an attendance goal. And that's twofold. Attendance, I can say, I'm sure it's at the elementary level, but at the secondary level, one of the big indicators for student success is students who are actually present. So setting a goal, making an emphasis. Surprisingly, I had Michaela run our first 10 weeks last year, and our attendance is really pretty good. It's between the 92 to 95%, so there is some room for some improvement, but it wasn't what I expected. But, even if you're talking 5% at a large high school, you're talking 50 kids. So it will help both academically, and I'm not sure where it will really on the financial part, but I still think it's a good goal. And I just wanted you to be aware that there will be goals there, and I do want to push that out to parents and partner with the parents in the community to put an emphasis on having the best attendance that we possibly can. So that's really all I really wanted to say on that. So.
Good. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next item, the War Memorial Field.
Yeah.
And again, we have our superintendent.
Yeah, so I did send everybody the invitation to the open house that the city of Sandpoint is holding with Greenplay. And Greenplay is the company they've hired to do a comprehensive plan with their park system. So tomorrow at the Chamber Hall, City Chamber Hall, anytime between 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., citizens, anybody interested, can go by and give input to Greenplay on that park system. And within that park system also includes the surface options at Memorial Field. And then tomorrow evening at the Hive down on First Street between 6:30 and 8 is a public input meeting, and Greenplay will be running that meeting. My understanding is tomorrow they will be it's kind of the last time they'll be taking input And Jennifer Stapleton shared with me that they will be, I think, giving their final report September 30th. And then I also wanted to include, and I think you got it in your packet, a letter from Ty Jones, who is the Idaho High School Activities Association Executive Director. And basically just saying is that in support of secured playability, and that they're always looking for sites to host state tournaments. And we definitely would be in the running if we could have a facility where we had lights, seating, and some playability. So I just wanted to bring that out, that I'd met with Ty when I was in Boise, and then he did craft this letter. So it's something that we have to have a great working relationship with the city. It's important. We don't have the acreage for our own facility, and so just working through that, it's important that we give input. So,
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
question. Do you advise, us individually to participate in this?
Well-
or should this board, go on the record as a board representing the school district with a preference?
I didn't bring it today as an action item. I brought it just as a discussion item. But-
I don't think it's an action item for the board.
I think it's a little outside our,
There is, of course, in the letter, from what I took for it, I mean, if you read it, what he didn't come out and say, but an artificial turf would be extend the season of Memorial Field so we could be used more often.
We could use it earlier in the spring, we could use it later in the fall, we could use it 24/7, with lights, there's no limit to how many hours it could be used in a day.
Right. Well, the city has a trade-off. If it's a financial thing, maybe it is, and maybe that has to be reconciled. But I would certainly recommend anybody who wants to go to the hearing, have your input right there, and let them know. And we have attended the school board, not the board, but members of the staff have gone to all of the city meetings when this issue has come up for the last year. So we have had input.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Kelly just would want to know if more than 3 board members were planning on attending the evening meeting, she would need to know.
you have to post it.
Okay.
So
Now, I think
please,
the open house, though, if you just wander in.
open house would be different.
And make your opinion known.
Right.
I think that would be okay. Okay, let's move on. The next we
Thank
have
you.
is finance. We have a financial update from our Chief Finance and Operations Officer, Lisa. Good evening.
Good evening.
Almost evening.
Welcome back.
I have probably 3 different areas to report on this evening, and I'll start with, first, all of last week, our external auditors. And if you're a public entity in Idaho, you must be externally audited annually. Were on site doing their second field work and really kind of the heavy lifting portion. And they will present the final audit to you on October 22nd. And the things that I want to first say, there'll be no surprises in that final report to the board. But when we started fiscal year 19, which ended June 30th of 2019, we knew that we were going to be increasing what's called our fund balance, our reserve. We had included adding $200,000 to the reserve amount. And we also knew that federal forest dollars were going to be appropriated. And when we were setting our budget in May of 2018, that had not become final, so we knew we were just going to transfer those monies also into the fund balance. And then when school opened, we had higher than projected enrollment, particularly at the secondary level. And we knew that generated another $561,000 that we had not included in our revenue. So when we ended fiscal year 19, we had about 9.6% of our annual general fund budget in reserves, and it's in draft form now, and we continue to be worked on. But I think we're going to end with about 12.4%, which is an increase of about $1.4 million. And the other factors contributing beyond what I just discussed are less use in fuel and utilities primarily, and also for once in several, it's been many years, really some substantial interest earnings. Then I also would remind you that last fiscal year was the first year we started to contribute to our plant fund, which had less than $2,000 in its balance. We contributed $100,000 last year, and in this budget, we're contributing $200,000. Then I would just turn to the county has released values for property owners, and countywide, the assessor said that it was an increase in valuation of 14%. Last year, the county's increase was 11%, and we were, Lake Pend Oreille School District, which doesn't encompass a full county, was 10.4%. And so if we continue to track like we did last year, that would mean when we were projecting for our property taxpayers what the maintenance and operations supplemental levy rate would be, we had projected $221 per 100,000 of net taxable value, and that would bring it in at 4% less. It would be about $212 per net taxable 100,000. And this is intentional. We used a very conservative estimate of growth of 6%. And it's, since I've been in this position, we've always projected a rate higher than what the property taxpayer actually had to pay. Then I want to transition to the state. June 30th is also the fiscal year end for the state of Idaho. And some substantial things happened in the state. The first is at year end, they had to transfer a third of what is called the Public Education Stabilization Fund, or the equivalent of our reserve or fund balance, whatever lexicon terminology you want to use. So it dropped it from 93 million to 62 million. And that's primarily due to unprojected enrollment increases, student increases. And it's like for our school district, this is important because it softens if there are any kind of state holdbacks or cuts in the event of a recession or a particularly lean budget year. And then if we look at the state as a whole in their reserves, they've ended their year with $516 million, or a fund balance equivalent to 13.8% of their annual revenues. And for those of you that were here at the height of the recession, the state literally dwindled their entire reserves. And I do mean entire reserves. The chief economist for the state under the governor's direction, his name is Mr. Santos. He is pretty vocally now signaling to lawmakers and policymakers that he thinks recession is now within 9 to 18 months. That seems nationally to be, consensus is a strong word, a sentiment, and nationally, and aligning with Mr. Santos that the recession would be milder than the 2009 recession. So this really falls into the next topic, which is our new governor appointed, I think it's a 21-member, under the State Board of Education committee and K-12 Education Task Force. And they've been meeting this summer, and they've met for the third time yesterday. And then they have 4 different subcommittees. And honestly, it's been quite hard to follow this under the State Board of Education. The audio of the meetings is very bad, and unfortunately, the visual, just after the first week, just doesn't work. Our Senator Keogh is the chair of the teacher retention and, retired Senator Keogh, of the teacher retention and recruitment committee, and she's aware of it. Our present Senator Jim Woodward sits on a different subcommittee, it's called Budget Stability. So the things that I can share with you, one, sitting down with Senator Woodward maybe a little more than a week ago for a couple of hours. Yesterday, each subcommittee made their preliminary recommendations to the larger committee. And Governor Little has asked for 5 or 6 recommendations, not 25. And he wants them by the beginning of November. And what Senator Woodward shared from his committee and what he thinks is just the general sentiment in the legislature right now is that there is not the momentum to follow through on transitioning the state of Idaho to a student base with weighted different types of students. He also shared with me that there's a lot of discussion on continuing the career ladder allocation module. Yesterday, Senator Keogh's committee in reporting out, and then they met again all today, but I couldn't find where to listen in. They were going to finalize their recommendations. She also mentioned that they were recommending keeping the career ladder allocation module in place. Senator Woodward thinks that perhaps the only thing that will happen this session would be transitioning to an enrollment-based versus an average daily attendance-based funding formula. And already, statutorily, we will be reporting both ADA and enrollment this year in 4 different periods, but legislatively, the enrollment hasn't been defined. So a lot of work needs to be done on that. So things that are interesting about the career ladder allocation model is in its 5th and final year was it required that the state school districts pay a minimum base salary. It started in fiscal year 15 at $32,700, and in fiscal year 20 it's $38,500. So an increase of almost 18%. But on the other side, they're called rungs. The top rung in the same 5 years has only gone from $47,603 to $50,000, or a 5% increase. And what this committee is hearing is that the attention to the entry-level teacher versus the lack of attention to the more senior teachers is something that needs to be addressed. And for us, so now, these dollar amounts after this fiscal year are fixed. And just to tell you, so in fiscal year 20, we're projecting under the current rung system for the teachers an increase of just about $500,000 of state dollars to us. And now, in the 5th and final year, that stays that way. That will drop for us, but literally half. It will generate $250,000 in 2020 fiscal year 21. 60% of our teachers are at the top rung, right? And then more and more compression and less dollars for those districts that have top attainable teachers. Then it also has a lot of implications for the discussion tonight. What is going to happen with the funding formula at the state level if, one, we go into some kind of mild recession, and 2, the administrative recommendation before the board tonight is to, effective July 1st, 2021, to have an indefinite term maintenance and operation supplemental levy at the current amount. And those are my remarks. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. Gary?
I have several. First of all, Lisa, what was the overall state revenue at the end of the fiscal year? There was some debate during the legislative session, and the legislature took a very conservative number.
I don't have the exact, well, I do in the stack of paper. I don't have the exact dollar amount, but they were under their projection by, I think, 17 million.
Really, they were that close to their
Yeah.
projection.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Boise, revenues were down,
Correct.
but they were anticipating that they would catch up on April 15th.
Right. And so they didn't, on the personal income tax, meet their revenue projection, but I think their sales tax was a little higher. So that it's really the personal income tax collections, which even after the April payment was made, did not meet the target.
Okay, my next question is, I'm a little confused. You said Senator Woodward's sense is that the legislature is going to move to an enrollment-based model, okay? But you said that it will not, it may not include, the differentials for student categories?
So they're kind of different conversations, but to remind you, there was a legislative intern committee that met for almost 3 full years. And their recommendation was to, like almost every other state in the nation, go to what's called a student-based funding formula. So annually, there's a student-based amount of $5,000. And then there are different types of weights, the types of weights that will be used.
They're going to eliminate a lot of the weights we have now, for special education students, for alternative education students, for rural schools.
No, what Senator Woodward was saying is that largely the funding formula that's in place in Idaho now, and it has been for the last 26 years, would stay relatively unchanged, except that it would change to an enrollment base, which is very different than the conversation that dominated last legislative session, where they would completely change like the whole structure, and they would go to what's called student-based with weights. Now, the current funding formula, has some higher dollar amounts for rural schools, or an alternative school program, or the JVC. The proposed funding formula last session had, and special education, had, overlaps, but they function very, very differently. And
Okay, well,
Senator Woodward's sentiment was that there wasn't,
It's just going to be so much per student, flat rate.
well, no.
I think I'm going to cut it off here. We could go ahead and conjecture all evening about what's going to happen. So we're so far away from any decision or anything being done. So, there'll be much more to come rather than just speculate what may
But
happen.
the takeaway here is for our enrollment, as Tom was sharing with you, the first 9 weeks of school
Right.
has been the nexus of 75% of our funding annually. And now statutorily, we're going to have to report 4 times a year, and at the secondary level, and the 4th one is in April. For us, if those are the dates, it will financially negatively affect us unless we can retain at the secondary
Right.
level our enrollment through April.
If that happens.
That's always our goal.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going
Thank
to
you.
move on to the next item. We're now on to action items, administration. And of course, the first one is the indefinite resolution issue. And we have it listed under here for our superintendent and for Lisa. You're going to present that to us?
I don't have anything to present.
Right, so you've got I believe you've got the language. in
We have
your
all the
packet.
documents.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, in that
And-
case,
Discussion.
I will, I'll entertain a motion on the resolution as it's written here, and then we'll go into the discussion after we have a motion on the floor.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2003, indefinite term maintenance and operation supplemental levies.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Resolution 2003, indefinite term maintenance and operational levy. Discussion. Who would like to start? The Vice Chair?
Sure. I had some points of interest after our hearing from our community last meeting, and I wanted to get a sense of where the other trustees were on these issues. One of the things that really came out is that the community wants some sort of guarantee that the level of reporting and transparency would remain strong. There's a sense that if we go to an indefinite term levy, that somehow that we would not be as communicative with the community on how that money's being spent. And I don't know the best way to assure the community that that is not the case, but it's just not part of the, going to indefinite term levy would not mean in any way that the dollar amounts are not reported as thoroughly, that we would not have the complete transparency that we have every 2 years. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on how to assure the community that that's not the case. It just kept coming up in public
Yes,
comment.
I'm sure everybody.
I think that as we put this together and advertise is not the right word, but reach out.
Communicate it.
Reach out and communicate to the public what this means. That needs to be one of the bullet points that we discuss is that how we report this and how we account for every cent is not going to change. Nothing's going to change. If I would also say that there are certain people that don't trust the way it's done now, even though it's a wide open book. So some people, you're not going to alleviate any concerns that some folks have if they already have a negative mind made up towards the situation.
So there's another point that I would like to see really verbally communicated, and that's that, it's set at a flat rate. And then as Lisa said, as the county's property tax base, is that the right term, grows, the taxpayers' burden for this levy would decrease.
The percent would decrease.
The percentage that they each carried would decrease because the levy would stay at that set rate.
Which I think it's important to communicate both aspects of that. It's $12 million. It's $12 million, whether or not the property taxes are up or down.
Mm-hmm.
In a down market,
And the assessments.
yeah,
The
the assessment, in a down market, the percentage
That's true.
allocation is higher.
That's true.
So it's a fixed amount.
Yeah.
And how you get to that amount changes based on assessed values. But yeah, I think that needs,
It just needs
all these
clarity
things need to
in
be clearly
the conversations that
communicated.
would happen between now and November.
Right.
But another point was raised that I really wanted some feedback from you guys. Somebody said, well, that's fine, but can you guarantee the community that you're not going to come back in 2 years and ask for an incremental change to this operation and maintenance levy, specifically to this operational levy? That if we set it, can you just say for the next 6 years you're not going to change it, so that we know as a community what to expect? I thought there was some validity to that, and in fact I was hoping maybe you would have some insight as our CFO. Is that something we can realistically do with our community? Say, yeah, let's come to you and ask for this indefinite levy amount, and then say, we're going to work within that for the next 6 years and not make it that change. I thought it was a valid conversation piece and part of what we should discuss.
Well, We certainly hope we are not going to have to come to the community every 2 years for money like we have been doing.
But I don't like that.
And I think we can assure them that we certainly would not foresee in the next couple of years, at least, and hopefully more, coming back to them for more money. And one of the things that this happens is it really puts the accountability more on the shoulders right now of the board and others to live within the means, not to be able to, so you're not going to the public unless you really need it. So I think the accountability really steps up that have to do that. So I would foresee in the years, if we had a standard amount of money that's coming in, it gives the board and the school district, that's the amount of money we have to live in. We don't want to come to the public and ask routinely for more money to increase that. So that may mean certain years of belt tightening to live within the means that we have. Yes, certainly, eventually, we would have to come to the county to increase the levy. You have inflation going up, you have so many unknowns that it's hard to make an absolute promise because we don't know what the state's going to do. We don't really know from year to year how much money we're going to be worked with, but I certainly would hope we could make it known that we did not expect to come back to the public and asking for an increase in funds in the near future, beyond 2 years. But
I think that there's positives and negatives to both sides of that argument. The positive side is if we make that commitment, it's like managing in a down market. It's pretty easy because you know what you have. And it's harder when there's tons and tons and tons of money because it's easy to say yes to things. If you know, hey, this is our budget, it's not changing. Well, then you can plan around that. However, I would not want to paint ourselves into a corner and have some unforeseen event that we need to deal with. The other side of that is, do you set yourself up for, hey, they said they're not going to change, they're not going to come to us for 5 years, and then people go, oh, 5 years? Well, why isn't it 10? Or why isn't it 15? That argument can be turned into a pretty slippery slope, I think. And it's impossible to know what's coming down the pike. We have no idea.
And I think, too, we don't know what future boards might want to do.
Exactly.
We know what this board is going to do, but it may only be this composition for another year. So you can't obligate the future boards and what they can do and what they can't do. So, yes.
On this topic, can I lob it back to our CFO because you made a point about state dollars for teacher increases could possibly go to half. And then obviously the backfilling of that comes from our budget.
So there's a technical answer to your question, is that no board combined another board beyond one fiscal year. That's in statute.
Right.
So we can make-
You have to be very clear in your statement.
That's true.
Right.
You cannot make a financial statement beyond fiscal year 2020, which ends June 30th. And then I would just remind you that 65% of our funding pivots on a state annual appropriation. And so
Yeah.
35% currently is a maintenance and operation levy. And with a flat amount, that percent will decrease and the state's portion will increase. So we will become more reliant on state public policy and actions. And I concur that, with the exception of the recession, this is the most sort of pivotal time from a public policy advantage and discussion. K-12, what should we do in Idaho with K-12 funding?
Right. Yes, I think the best we can do is just let the public know that, one, we have the accountability, it's there.
Right.
We know with a fixed levy, we need to live within that means.
Yeah.
And it would be just, the last thing we would want to do is to come back and ask for an increase anytime in the near future. And I think we'd make an effort to do that, so.
And going along with that, if you try to go out 6 years, well, all of us would be up for reelection again. And we may not be here.
That's true. Well, I mean, we have a
And
two-year
we can't,
commitment.
and we can't encumber even ourselves for.
When we go for a levy, we have a 2-year
Yeah.
budget set, whether the board turns over or not. So I mean, there is
Permanent
that
levy doesn't even
2-year.
kick in for 2 years. I mean,
Yeah.
we're until June
Year and a
30th
half,
of
right.
2021 under the supplemental. So this
Correct.
doesn't even start for 2 years.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so I'd like to, number one, make some comments. First of all, I'd like to thank, all the people that came and
Yes.
made public comments at the last board meeting. It was reassuring to see so much interest in our district, and it helped make up my mind. I was very much on the fence about this, and what I heard from the patrons was, support for our district, a realization that the state is not fully funding education, and that if we are going to, maintain the current level of programs and staffing and schools, we're going to need additional support. And, unfortunately, the only tool that we have as a board here is a property tax levy.
Right.
We can't do income taxes, we can't do sales taxes, we don't have any other tools to raise money. I heard loud and clear, the resentment that these additional taxes come on the shoulders of property tax, of property owners. And I totally agree with that. And I wish there was some other way we could do this, but there's not, So I'm prepared to support this. I don't like the fact that it rests, totally on the shoulders of the property tax owners. The other thing I'd like to ask, Lisa, what our district has done for many years is we have always, during the whole series of supplemental levies, we've always been really good about keeping separate account, of how we spend our supplemental levy dollars. And every 2 years when our supplemental levies come back up, we've been able to very accurately account, for how we spent monies the last 2 years and when we ask for support the next 2 years of the cycle. And I think that just because this is a permanent levy, it's not a blank check. We still need to account to our patrons separately, for how we're spending those local property tax dollars.
Absolutely.
So I think what we're asking, and I think, Lisa, you can probably reaffirm that the fact is, with the permanent levy, we're still going to account for the money that comes in with with our levy money, like we've been doing in the past.
So our accounting software is set up to do that, and we have always recorded our maintenance and operations supplemental levy in what's called a fund, a separate fund. And so much so that in our annual audit, we also have additional reports that other school districts do not have to show how our general fund breaks out our supplemental levy. And absolutely, during the annual budgeting process, the board would be a part of that conversation, and we would continue to report an indefinite term supplemental levy in a separate fund.
So, that answers my question. I mean, we're one of the few school districts in the state that actually does this.
Only one.
Maybe the only school,
Right.
that actually keeps complete separate, accounting, for how specifically the local levy monies are spent. Okay, then my other question is, and Geraldine talked about this too, is, now just because, if this passes, this means that we have, secure funding. But just because we have secure funding doesn't mean that we are not accountable to our patrons in our planning and budgeting. I know we have very detailed budgets and we have accounts and we account for every cent that we spend, but I think we need to be just as vigilant about including our patrons in our planning and budgeting, like we have been when we're planning for supplemental levies. And I think just because we have the security of we may have the security of a more stable funding source doesn't mean that we're any less vigilant about like the chairman says, about, watching our budget and planning all of our expenditures.
Right. I agree.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I?
Yes, please.
So, just hearing the discussion here, just a couple points. Lonnie brought up the word trust, and I think it's really important that statements that come out of here, that we have our community and our patrons trust in the decision that we make, and the trust in spending that money wisely. I also very cautiously would be careful that we don't make a definitive statement, because I think the future is so unknown. I don't know what the right term is to say that, making every attempt to not increase that, to live within the 12.7 million, but there's so many unknowns there that I think we got to be careful that that trust doesn't get weighed in on saying you said you would not. You could even have patrons, the majority of patrons coming to us asking for an increase. What I see is any increase in that 12.7 million would be in a much smaller amount, very defined, and they would know exactly what that specifically the need would be. It cannot be increased without voter approval. So this board cannot increase that dollar amount without the voters' approval. And I think that's a statement there. So I think we have to be careful. I think, to say we want to make an attempt to not come back to the voters, but that's a definitive statement might be putting us into a corner where then we lose some trust with the patrons. I want to be as transparent and have an open book on that. So.
Well, I agree. It's like the facilities and maintenance, this doesn't mean we're not going to go to the voters ever for maintenance. For
You mean a
bond
facility?
issue, or facilities for a bond in the near future. I mean, certainly this is not really going to solve all our problems. And also I want to remind the board and everybody the fact all we're doing is making a decision to let the voters decide.
Yes.
We're not making,
say
it's
that.
not up to us to make the decision.
We just
It's
want the voters.
We want the voters
input.
to weigh in on this, and I feel it's kind of our responsibility to do that, to let them vote
Put
on
it to the
this.
voters.
Absolutely. If they say no,
Okay.
it's no.
Right.
That's democracy.
Okay, any other further discussion? Okay, there's a motion on the board, there's a motion on the floor, and I think we'll take a roll call vote for this one.
Roll call vote, Trustee Williams,
Aye.
Trustee Superger,
Aye.
Trustee Decker,
Aye.
Trustee Lewis,
Aye.
Trustee Kelly.
Aye. And that is adopted. Okay, next we have, we'll go on to the next item on here, transportation issue. We have our director, and we're nice to see you, and tell us about transportation.
Absolutely. Good evening. So each year in August, I ask the board to review and approve the transportation program. The transportation program this year is almost identical to the one you approved last year with a few changes that I'll point out. In Clark Fork, we added a turnaround at Lower Mosquito Creek, that was just for efficiency. The routes, we still have 35 routes, that hasn't changed. Along with the routes, we did reroute one route, which was Route 1, and that was for safety. We rerouted it in a way to eliminate 7 highway crossovers. So that was a good safety change on Route 1. Other than that, everything stayed pretty much the same. On payments in lieu, we anticipate 8 this year. We had 9 last year. And safety busing there's no change to the safety busing. And on daycare facilities served, we no longer serve Little Fit Daycare or Dollhouse Daycare. They no longer are operational.
Great.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the board? I don't think so. Thank you very much. We'll see you with more here, I think, later.
Thank you.
So,
Next, we have special education.
does it
No, you
require
need a
approval?
motion.
So I'd
Oh,
like
it does
to
require.
make a motion to approve the district transportation program as presented by James Keller.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2019-2020 district transportation program as presented. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion is adopted. Thank you. Next, we have the special education manual. Dr. Jensen, are you going to present this?
She's not here.
Okay.
The special education manual is a very, very, very large document.
80 pages?
You were given the link
No,
there.
more than that, yes.
And
300,
did
yeah.
you have anything to add on there, Kelly?
If you had any questions other than her agenda request, we can hold off if you had questions, or?
I don't have any questions. Did you have, anybody have, Geraldine?
So it's referred to as the 2018 Special Education Manual. Is that just because there haven't been significant changes and we just decided not to change the year, or?
So the State Department of Ed and the State Board of Ed adopt that, then it goes to the legislature to adopt there, so it's actually titled 1 year behind.
Okay.
Dr. Jansen and I had a lot of discussion and with the state about that, so
Okay.
that's our current manual
This is
for
our
you
current
to
one that
adopt.
we're
Yes.
approving. So unless
In
if
that
you're
case,
ready.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to,
Make a motion that the Lake Mondre School District trustees adopt the 2018 Idaho Special Education Manual as presented.
I'll second that.
it's been moved and seconded that we approve the 2018 Idaho Special Education Manual. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion is adopted. Thank you. And next, we have the consent agenda.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion on that?
I'd like to discuss item I, school buses.
Okay.
The number of them, is that your?
Is that the snow removal?
No, he's talking about
Acquisition of 5.
the,
Oh.
look on this back of this one. No, where is it?
From the back of the agenda.
The back of that one.
There you go, flip that over, that's in your left hand.
Here, look on mine.
Your other left.
Item I.
Okay,
That one.
well,
It's part of the consent agenda.
okay, I'm
Yeah, yeah.
sorry, okay. Okay, what's your question?
Question, did we get bids for buses with seatbelts?
No, I don't believe we did. Yes, Jim Jones.
We talked
did
about
not.
that
We
last.
talked about the issue, why we
Last.
didn't have it.
Last year, yeah.
We did not spec our buses this year with seatbelts.
I'd like to remind this board that, at the ISBA resolution, we unanimously supported the resolution for seatbelts on buses.
Okay, well, we've already talked about the issue before. Geraldine, yes, something?
No, but maybe historically we could look back because we did discuss it here and look at the cost of it and,
It was not cost effective, as I remember. For the amount of money.
Do we have a number of what it would cost?
think we did.
actually,
I think
maybe
we
we can
did, I
refer to
remember.
James.
So, when we did our 5-year bus purchase plan, we did it with a set amount of money. Currently, that was not in our plan for this year to purchase those, especially at 5 buses. I would say that our safety record is flawless, and I think we did not see a need to do that this year.
Do you know, James, what that would cost approximately?
It-
I know it's not cost effective to add seatbelts, but to get seatbelts installed on new buses.
On new buses, it's about $10,000 per bus.
So
That's at time of
If,
acquisition.
if we want in the future, we could make it an agenda item if the board would like to do that. We'll discuss it
Yes,
later.
it would have cost us an additional $50,000 this year.
I'd just like to say, yes, this board unanimously supported the ISBA resolution for seatbelts on buses. Coeur d'Alene is buying seatbelts on buses. And I saw one of their buses at one of our activities, and the bus driver allowed me to come on and look, and he talked a little bit about it. And the driver of the bus was very supportive of school buses. They said they're not only a safety issue, but they're he said it makes it a lot easier for him to control
Discipline
students
factor.
on the bus.
I think we'll put that on the agenda as a separate issue, because it involves the budget, it involves a lot of other things.
And- I'm sorry.
I did have a comment on the acquisition of the wheelchair lift. That bus cost less than the regular bus.
Yes.
Yeah, you think it'd be the other way around.
It's because it's a 37 passenger.
I figured it was a smaller
Yeah.
version, yeah, okay. Are there any other questions having to do with any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, if there are no further questions, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Thank you. We are down here to announcements, and
Yeah.
Superintendent, do you have any? announcements?
Just looking forward to getting the school year started. We're going to meet with administrators next week, and then the week after that, the teachers will be coming back into the buildings. We've got the welcome back breakfast and opening remarks on the 29th. Yeah, morning Thursday, the 29th. And then the students will be coming in. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce to you the new Sandpoint High School principal, David Miles. David, if you could stand up, so.
Welcome.
Speech, now you're done.
Can you say a few words to the board?
And
Announcements.
what's that?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Nope, and that pretty much is where
we
we
get
are.
around to all the principals when we have announcements anyway, so we'll go to Casey first, I guess. So do you have any announcements for us?
Yeah, today we did some interviews for a new English position, which is great. And we had some great candidates, and so we're excited to offer the job to someone hopefully tonight. Excited about that, and also we're excited about getting a new school year. Had a bunch of people back today, the interviews and different things, and we're excited. So we've got some good things coming. We've got a new SRO coming on board at the middle school, and we've got a lot of good things going on.
Great.
Any new programs or activities at your school this year?
Well, I think we're going to start the drama class. Not that middle schoolers need more drama, but we are going to start a new drama class this week. And so there's a number of different activities that we have. We garden now at the school, and so that's something that we're incorporating into our class as well. And so we've got a lot of diverse things going on, and we're excited for it. Good things happening.
Thank you. David, your first meeting here. Please introduce yourself to some of us that don't know you.
All right, David Miles, new principal of Sandpoint High School. Thanks for having me back. I'm returning. I don't need to give you the whole spiel, but glad to be back. I'm still just kind of learning the ropes, obviously. I have a ton of support, which is great. So the staff that I've met, so far and that have returned that I already know, have been great help. And a lot of new people. So surrounded by great people that are keeping the ship afloat, whether I'm really at the helm right now or not. So Tom left it in a good place, and the staff is doing great. We just hired a new health occupation teacher, so that was one program that we're really happy to see that we're keeping, and it seems like they're doing a really good job. So it's really not the only real big business that I've taken care of so far.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, welcome back.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Andrew, do you have any questions?
Just one more thank you to the Rotary of Sandpoint and the Chafe 150 ride. You saw a very positive article from the Daily Bee, and the Reader. It was a pleasure to join Tom and Elizabeth Alessio to receive that check on behalf of our school district. And as you know, that will continue to support our literacy initiative. We really have this vision that we want all kids reading by 3rd grade. So we're continuing to support primary literacy in our after-school programs. That will maintain a position, help us add a position at Southside. They've been trying to run an after-school program last year with sort of local funding, and now we're able to use some of the Chafe Rotary funding to start a position there. I'm absolutely thrilled for Southside. And then just to continue another round of literacy training and professional development for staff. The feedback was incredible last year, and we know when we do the right work for multiple years in a row, we can make a systems impact as opposed to just new curriculum, new training, a one-day workshop that doesn't always take hold. So to have a multi-year approach feels fantastic, and I thank you all for supporting that.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements out there?
Oh, I can always talk.
Yes.
I just really neat things for our district. There were 8 of us from our Sandpoint High School that were at the CTE, the Career Technical Education Conference last week in Boise Reach. And our keynote was from Apple. And it was interesting, her perspective on technology, that, none of you think that the light switch is a new modern thing because you grew up with it. And so our district is ahead in that we provide one-to-one with so many things, and a lot of neat things that we felt that, other districts were like, you do that? So I thought it was really positive, the programs and things that we're able to offer at Sandpoint High School, and just how, technology is here. And for kids that were born with an iPhone, it's no different than for us, the light switch.
Great. Melanie, anything? Board members, any announcements? Okay, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.